thought in this second half I would speak in terms of, well, I'm going to tell a story. So I will tell a story and you get to listen to a story. It's interesting just noticing people's reactions to me saying that. So I definitely got a few smiles there. I don't think that will be the whole story, so maybe some of you are thinking, not a story, that's not what I've come for, I don't know. So we can have mixed responses and relationships to story. So maybe to begin with, I would just say a little bit about why I'm choosing to speak in this way this morning and why I've chosen to tell a story. Because there's lots of ways of sitting here and communicating to you something about what Buddhism is, or what Buddhism is pointing to, and story is just one way. But the reason I've chosen to speak this morning in terms of story, partly it's just subjective preference, so I have to kind of admit that. But also I think there can be a view that story is somehow more basic or less important than other ways of communicating. Yeah, so in a retreat 2 weeks ago, I was also telling a story. People enjoyed it, I think, and we laid down beforehand, and somebody said, it was just like being at kindergarten and having a story read. So it can have that association, can't it, that we are just kind of children. It takes us back in some ways to childhood when we might have heard more stories than perhaps we do now, in a certain kind of way. So that can form the impression that it's somehow not as grown up, or not as important in some kind of way. But reflecting on the subject this week, I was just remembering all the different stories, not all of them, but many of the different stories that I've heard in my life, and the impact that they've had on me, and the change that they have initiated. And I would say that some of the key turning points in my life have come through actually hearing stories. Actually, whether that's reading a story or somebody telling a story, they do have the power to transform us. Maybe this is an obvious point, but I think it's worth saying that stories do have the power to transform us. I think that the Buddha knew that. So I think Buddhism has a tradition of storytelling, because sometimes the most powerful way of delivering a truth or revealing a certain beauty about the real nature of life is through story. Yeah, so sometimes the Buddha would tell the story of his own life, for example. He would tell groups of people what he'd done, what had happened to him, and that had a powerful effect on them. He also told stories about other Buddhas. Yeah? How he knew them, I'm not sure, but he would tell stories about Buddhas countless aeons ago in the past and their lives. Yeah? And that also affected people in a certain kind of way. He told stories about himself and other people when they were in previous lives as animals, and the things that they used to get up to in the jungle. His friends and his enemies, and how there were different types of animals and how they all interacted. And then at the end he says, and I was the elephant, and my friend Ananda here was the tiger, and he explains who was who. So all these are ways in which the Buddha would use story to try to communicate a truth to people, to communicate to them what he had seen or experienced. And that's carried on throughout the history of Buddhism. So I remember reading a book about Thai forest monks, and it was describing how their approach to communicating the Dharma to other people was primarily through stories. So every so often you'd have this village in Thailand just going about its business, and suddenly someone would come out of the forest in a robe, carrying a bowl, and he would stay for a couple of days and just tell stories. Maybe the same stories about the Buddha and the animals. And then he would just disappear again into the forest, and people would be left with the stories. So that was the way in which these things were passed on. It was only later in the, I think, late 19th century when the Bangkok government was reforming and things were becoming more rational and more scientific, that some monks got sent out to tell the storytelling forest monks to stop telling stories and to communicate the teaching in a different kind of way. And I'm not judging that, because that different kind of way is also effective. But the storytelling tradition certainly tailed off. Maybe it's still alive somewhere. So throughout the history of Buddhism, stories have been told. Throughout our own cultural tradition in the West as well, stories have been told and passed on. Just in the last couple of days, I've started reading the Odyssey again by Homer, and it's the foundational story of basically every story that has come since. It's fantastic. And that was also kept alive through people just telling it. So there we go. That's why I've chosen a story, because there's this rich history of storytelling in our culture, in the Western world, and within Buddhist culture. And hopefully it will affect you in some way. Hopefully the story will have an effect. I just throw in one other preliminary point, which is that last week I was not here present in the Saturday class because I was at the cinema with Tarapalata, and we were there all day from 10 in the morning till 10 at night watching the 3 Lord of the Rings films back to back. The director's cuts with 2 20-minute breaks in between. So it was quite an extreme day. And all week I've been existentially challenged and troubled by the impact of the story, because it's, if you know Lord of the Rings, it's quite a story, isn't it? And all these interwoven themes of power and corruption and friendship and honor and nature and industrialization, life, death. It's such a rich story, and it's been in my mind. And actually Tolkien, who wrote the Lord of the Rings, he had an interesting thing to say about stories. He said, well, people would criticize him and say that his fantasy novels were just escapism. You know, people were just escaping from the real world. And he said, well, yeah. He said, if you were in prison, it would be quite natural that you would want to escape. So the point he was making was that life without stories and without imagination is very imprisoning. You know, we narrow ourselves. If we're not imaginatively alive and open to stories, we narrow and contain ourselves in a certain kind of way. So he was saying that the novels were one way in which we free ourselves. So it'd be quite strange, wouldn't it, if Buddhism is all about freeing ourselves and liberating ourselves from a limited state of consciousness, a limited state of being, a limited imagination. If we were to strip it of its stories, that would be a shame, because of the power they have to help us become free, let's say, from the prison of the suffering of ordinary life. Okay, enough introductory stuff. That was my way of just preparing the ground. So I'm gonna read you a story. I have to admit it's an adaptation of a traditional Buddhist story. So if you want the original, you have to go and look at the Paramatta Jyotika, Volume 1, to be specific, which is a commentary to a collection of texts called the Sutta Nipata, which is one of the earliest collections of the Buddha's teaching. So we have those collected teachings The Paramattha Jyotika is a commentary on those teachings written at a later date. And the story we will hear comes from that commentarial tradition. And you could just read the commentaries in the translation. I've adapted it because I'm trying to do what storytellers have done over the years, which is bring the story to life for myself. Yeah, so to imagine myself into the story and how can I communicate it to you in a way that's alive. But also it might communicate better to you, but you can be the judge of that. And if you want the original, if you want the pure thing, then there you go. Come and ask me for the reference at the end. Yeah. So before I read it, an invitation to just get comfortable. So you can, maybe you're comfortable already, but just sit comfortably. If there's space and you want to lay down, then you can do that too. I wonder partly if the power of stories comes sometimes just from the fact that we tend to relax before we read them, or we experience them as a form of relaxation. Yeah. It's not very long, just a few minutes. Maybe close your eyes, just so that you can give your imagination a freedom. A long time ago, when the Buddha still walked the dusty roads, a group of monks asked him for a quiet place to meditate during the rainy season. He sent them to a deep forest at the foot of a mountain, a place where silence would gather like water in a still pond. The monks arrived, spread out their robes beneath tall, ancient trees, and began their meditation practice. But it wasn't long before they discovered that the trees were not empty. In their branches lived the forest spirits, ancient beings, including mothers preparing to bring new spirits into life. For a while the spirits waited, but as the days went by, they became restless. Who were these monks who'd come to their homes? And didn't they realize that their presence was stopping the mother tree spirits giving birth to baby tree spirits? So the spirits did what spirits often do when they feel unseen. They began to create disturbances, flickers in the darkness, the sound of footsteps which leave no tracks, cold breath on the skin of the monks, the kind that makes the hair rise on the back of the neck. Fear began to grow in the monks, like a small drum beating inside the chest. Then the moment came when they couldn't take it any longer, and they fled back to the Buddha. They told him everything, the shapes, the shadows, the shivering nights. And the Buddha listened quiet like a stone or a rock, listening to a river. Then he said, monks, you don't need to find a different forest. You need to find a different heart. So he taught them about loving kindness, metta, a force stronger than fear, a light that doesn't burn but blesses. He said that they should meditate like this: may all beings be happy and secure. He said they should think of every living thing without exception, the weak and the strong, the small and the large, the seen and the unseen, those living now and those yet to be born. May all beings become happy. He said they should love others like a mother loves her only child. He said they should develop an unlimited heart for the entire universe, sending metta above, below, and all around. And then finally he told them, go back. Go back to the forest and radiate kindness to those very beings who frightened you. And so they went back that same night, and they sat beneath the same trees, closed their eyes, and let kindness rise in them like a small flame in the darkness. May you be well. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering, they said. You who live in these branches, you who watch from the unseen places, may you be free from fear. Their words drifted upward through the leaves, and the forest spirits felt them, soft as warm rain on the skin. The fear melted. The disturbances stopped. A quiet joy spread among the trees, and in that peace, that shared kindness, the monks' hearts opened like flowers blooming in the night. The end. So if you laid down, you could sit back up. So ideally, if we had all day, ideally we would now just pause and people would have an opportunity to share just their responses to that story. We can't do that, unfortunately, so here I am. I'll just share my own responses to the story and pick out some themes. I think one of the strongest images for me from the story is the fact that it takes place in a forest. Stories always have a context, don't they? They don't take place in a vacuum. There's always a location and a context. And in this story, we have the context of the forest. Yeah, so let's just be with that image for a moment. So forest, I say the word and something is evoked. So forest, what does forest do for you? What does forest say? How does it affect you? So we know that forests are groups of trees, I guess. I haven't looked it up in the dictionary, but let's just say it's a group of trees. But they feel more like, they feel to be more than that, don't they? If we go for a walk in a forest, they also have a particular atmosphere, and that might depend on where the forest is, the time of year, the time of day, the types of trees, the types of creatures that live in that particular forest. So you could say each forest that we go into has its own unique quality or atmosphere, yeah, or environment, ambience. I can't help but bring in Lord of the Rings because of yesterday and its influence on me. But I was struck in watching the films how many different types of forests are entered into. You've got the, what's it called? Are there any big fans here? Because I might get something wrong. Lothlorien is the elves' forest, isn't it? And that's a kind of magical, wonderful kind of place. And then you get the other forests that are much more, well, a bit more fear-inducing, like the monks here experience. Mirkwood is the really bad one in Lord of the Rings. Sauron has kind of poisoned the trees. The trees are sick. So we go into different forests and they've got different kind of feelings, haven't they? Or evoke different kind of feelings for us. The other thing I was thinking about forests is how, I'm assuming none of us live in a forest. Yeah, we probably all live in the city. Maybe you live on the outskirts, but I don't think any of us probably live in forests, although you may have done at some time in your life. But for most of us in the modern world, the forest is not somewhere we stay. So it's somewhere we might go to and enter into. Once we've entered the forest, we have to move through it. But at some point, we also come out. Yeah. So the forest is a temporary atmosphere that we might experience. And the more I thought about that during the week, the more I realized that actually this metaphor of the forest is kind of a metaphor for all experience. So for example, everyone here this morning entered through the door. You could say that we entered the forest of the Buddhist center like an hour ago or an hour and a half ago, and we're moving through it, and at some point we will leave. Yeah? And this place has its own particular atmosphere, depending on the time of day, depending on the people who show up. A certain atmosphere gets created. Yeah? Me giving this talk, because I have opened my mouth at the beginning and started to speak, we've entered something. I've entered into something by starting to talk, and you have entered into something by listening. And we're currently navigating that. I might get a bit lost sometimes. You might get a bit lost sometimes. But at some point it will end. You will all applaud. And then we'll all leave out the door as well. So just anything we're doing, there's this movement into a certain type or quality of experience. We have the experience and then we move into another one. Yeah. I was thinking it might be relevant to use that metaphor, particularly in terms of meditation. So a lot of you will have come here to learn about Buddhism generally and probably specifically about meditation. It's kind of a big draw for people to Buddhism. But we could use the metaphor of the forest in relation to meditation. So we've all, I think most of us have done it this morning, and if not, you will have done it anyway at some point. But the experience of meditation, we sit down, don't we, and we enter into something that is not our usual way of being in the world. We step into something. And then for however long we do it, whether it's 10 minutes or half an hour, we're in something. We're in a particular environment, and then the bell goes or whatever happens, and we stop and we leave it. But meditation is quite a curious forest to enter into. It's more like there are multiple forests or different regions of the forest. So when we sit down to meditate, one of the things we might enter into more fully than we are ordinarily experiencing is our own body. Yeah? So it's a bit strange because we actually stop moving, but maybe it's in the stopping moving that we turn towards our actual physical experience, whatever that might be, whether we notice we've got pain in the body, or lightness in the body, or restlessness, itching. We start to notice things, don't we, that we might miss when we're just on the U-Bahn or doing whatever we're doing in our usual routine. So there's an entry into that forest that we call the body. There's also the entry into the forest of, let's say, the mind and thought. We start to see, don't we, the different thoughts that are coming through our mind. Easy to get lost in that forest, isn't it? Or find, oh, I'm going around in circles with the different thoughts. There's also, I would say, the entry into what we might describe as the forest of the heart. So when we sit to meditate, we might experience the body, we'll experience what's happening in the mind and our thoughts, but probably we also start to notice what's moving in the heart, to put it poetically, or what our emotional experience is. Yeah, so we come into contact with emotion. Yeah. And that is going to be a different experience on a different day, a different hour of the day. But also for different people, we have different relationships, so the quality of our connection with our emotional life will be different for different people. For me, the whole area of emotion has been quite elusive, and actually coming into a relationship to it takes some work, because all this stuff can be going on kind of down here in the depths, the emotional churnings away, but I don't always notice that, to be honest. I love this poem by Charles Bukowski I quoted in the WhatsApp group, The Bluebird. Let me see if I can remember it and I will share it with you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke, and the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? You want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes when everyone's asleep. I say, I know you're in there, so don't be sad. And then I put him back in, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die. And so we sleep together like that, with our secret pact. And it's nice enough to make a man weep. But I don't weep. Do you? Whenever I do that off the top of my head, my bluebird starts thumping. But it's strong, isn't it? Strong stuff. So maybe you relate to that kind of disconnection from what's going on down there, what's chirping away, trying to get our attention, and the difficulty that we can experience in allowing that to come out. Maybe you can also experience emotion quite vividly and actually overwhelming kind of emotion, which would be would require a different poem. Yeah. I think the point I wanted to make in talking in that way and referring to the poem is that when we sit to meditate and we come into contact with our emotions and what's really going on there, we're coming into a closer relationship to it. And there can be all kinds of things. And often if we experience what we might describe as disturbing emotion, or emotion that we might not want to find in meditation, we can assume that we're getting it wrong. Yeah? That we're doing something wrong, or that the meditation doesn't work, or that we're not good enough at it. But I don't think it's like that. I think that's what meditation is an entry into the forest of the heart and coming into contact with our real emotional experience and emotional life. And we don't have to be scared of that. In a way, the meditations that we're doing, they open that up. So the whole range of our experience. And it's not just disturbing emotion that we encounter, or disturbances in the body, or disturbances in the mind. We also experience lightness in the body, joy in the body, clarity in the mind, great thoughts, like really good thoughts and ideas and clarifications, and really strong positive emotions as well. So through meditation, through Buddhism, we're opening up to the whole range of what it is to be human, the whole possibility of human experience. So we're not getting anything wrong if that happens. And the meditations are giving us, particularly the Metta Bhavana, it's giving us a container in which all that can be experienced a bit more fully and worked with creatively and positively. Not to say we might not need other forms of help with some of that, but the Metta Bhavana and meditation in general is helping us come into relationship more fully with who we are and what we experience. So the monks in our story, their predominant experience in the meditation and in the forest there was fear. And when they experienced the fear, which is kind of fair enough, isn't it? Like, I was thinking about my own experiences on solitary retreats where usually you're out in the middle of nowhere in a little hut on your own, not necessarily in the forest, but away from other people. And you can get scared. Yeah. The worst time for me is the first night when the sun goes down and you have to go outside to pee. So there's never toilets in solitary retreat cabins. They're always outside, or you just pee anywhere. And it's fine in the day, isn't it? But then as soon as the sun goes down and it's dark out there, I start holding it. But then there's nothing to be afraid of, I discover. But just night carries a certain fear with it, doesn't it? We've probably got these deep primal fears, and presumably that's what's getting triggered for these monks. And it's interesting, their response is to leave. Yeah, and sometimes we can experience fear so strongly that we just have to get out of the situation. So I'm not saying under all circumstances, whenever we experience fear, we should just be there and experience it. But what I'm interested in is how quickly they leave, according to the story. So they've gone there with the intention of doing a rainy season retreat, which would be 3 months. And presumably this happens fairly soon in the story, that the forest spirits can't start creating the disturbances and the monks leave. So the actual commentary doesn't say this, but I wonder, what was their motivation? Like, they obviously had the enthusiasm, they asked the Buddha to tell them where to go, but then they leave quite soon. So either it was just really overwhelming and scary, and if there were tree spirits, I'm sure they can create a lot of mischief. Or maybe they were just not so into it. It's hard to say, isn't it? But in any case, it's like I don't think they're fully in touch. Maybe this is unfair, and I'll come back to it. Maybe they're not fully in touch with their deepest motivation. Yeah, at the first sign of trouble, it's like, yeah, I'll go somewhere else. So again, when we ourselves exploring Buddhism experience things that we might not expect, one thing that I think is really useful is to be in touch with why we're here in the first place. Because all of us here will have some deeper motivation for being here than just to have a good time. Yeah, assuming you are having a good time. But there'll be a deeper motivation for why you've decided to come here this morning. There are millions of things you could have done this morning, but you're not doing them. You're doing this. So why? Again, it's listening to the bluebird, isn't it? But why do we find ourselves on this day in a Buddhist center listening to Padmasagara speaking? And can we keep in touch with that deeper motivation, whatever it might be? Probably if we asked ourselves what that motivation is, it's not so easy to kind of put into words. Maybe you'll get a word or two, or an image, or just a feeling that being here is of value. But then if you ask again, maybe you get a further clarification. We were doing this on Monday night in the meditation course, asking what's our heart's deepest wish. And it felt like people really touched into a deeper place, which was not always comfortable, by the way, but just asking that question, what do I really want? What do I want? What do I really desire? Yeah, it's quite strong stuff. But I would imagine for all of us, if we ask that question enough and get deeply down enough, we find that there's some real richness there and strength there and courage there. And probably the reason is not just to do with us and our life, but has broader, bigger implications. Another Lord of the Rings moment. It's quite striking. When you watch the 3 films back to back, one of the things we both noticed was how much of a burden carrying the ring becomes for Frodo. Yeah, you really see that unfolding. He's got the wound from the sword, but also his neck is just becoming more and more red. And yeah, he's just becoming more and more weighed down by the weight of the burden. But also you see his determination throughout just getting stronger and stronger. Like he's a reluctant hero, isn't he, in the film? There's a moment where he's with Galadriel and she shows him in the water pool the Shire on fire and being destroyed, and he says, after seeing that vision, he says, then I know what I have to do. He has to destroy the ring. So it's not just about him. And in fact, he begins to see that he's not going to get back. It's the deeper motivation to surrender himself for something greater. And Sam as well, he does the same, doesn't he? It's just his devotion towards his friend. He's just going to risk everything. And there's this moment where he's giving out the bread. I'm saying it as if we all watched it last week. Maybe some of you don't even know the story. Anyway, there's this ring, right? Let's not go into it. Anyway, Sam's dishing out the bread, and he says to Frodo, "Oh, there's enough." And Frodo says, "Enough for what?" And he says, "For the journey home as well." But then later in the film, there's another moment like that, and Frodo says something like, "What about the journey home?" And he says, "Well, I'm starting to think there's not going to be a journey home." But he's not stopping. They're still going to destroy the ring, save the world. So what there is, in the end, yeah. Without wanting to spoil it or anything. So I think all of us are in touch with something of that. There's a deeper current in all of our lives. So let's move on a bit. And I just want to pick up on what the Buddha says in the story as well, because again, I think there's some interesting points for us. It sounds so unpoetic, doesn't it? Anyway, the Buddha tells them to go back. They don't need a different, this was my own playing around with it, you don't need a different forest, you need a different heart or a different quality of heart. It's not about changing where you are, it's about changing how you see things, how you relate to things, is what he says to them. And I think that's really interesting, that the Buddha is essentially saying, just be there. Can you go back and can you just be there and experience what you experience? And in a way, I think Buddhism begins there, with us just stopping and just starting to notice. It's so easy, isn't it, to get caught up in life and busyness and routine and habit. So can we just find ways of breaking that, stopping, and just noticing? That's kind of the first step. In a way, you could say the monks they weren't really in the forest to project my own habits onto them. Maybe they were just going there with this good idea that they were going to do this long retreat and have some great experiences and become enlightened like the Buddha. Maybe they were never really in the forest. They were just in their own idea of what was there. And when the disturbances start happening, they also project certain ideas onto what's happening. So the Buddha's saying, just be there and really notice what's going on. Just stop. I'll throw in another poem. I don't know this one by heart. We also had this on the recent retreat. This is Pablo Neruda. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment, without rush, without engines. We would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth can teach us as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. I really love that poem, and this idea of just being still, keeping quiet, just noticing. And the images he gives us, they're so sensory, aren't they? So the man looking at his hurt hands, really feeling the experience of the pain that has come through gathering salt. The fisherman in the cold sea killing whales, noticing. A whale is the biggest mammal in the world, isn't it? The blue whale. Maybe just metaphorically, we don't see when we are doing damage to the biggest thing. It's kind of an incredible image. This idea of not being so single-minded, keeping our lives moving, and for once just stopping and doing nothing. Yeah. So just stopping and noticing and really seeing what's going on, coming into our senses, that can have quite an effect, I think. Maybe things are not what they appear to be when we learn to do that more and more. But the Buddha doesn't just say, go back and just be there. He teaches them the metta bhavana, in a sense. He teaches them metta, and to radiate metta in all the different directions, to care for others as a mother would care for her only child. So there's this lovely interplay between stopping and noticing and actually being there, but also the creative, imaginative act of opening to others. For me, that teaching the Buddha gives on metta, it's a call to imagine. It's an invitation to imagine really, really deeply. He's giving it to a group of monks, isn't he? So a group of guys. And he says it's just like a mother's love for her only child, which they can't know from direct experience. It's asking them to imagine. He's saying, send metta in all the directions, up, down, in all sides, to all sides. So when we think like that, our imagination immediately starts projecting different directions, doesn't it? So we're stretching our sense of ourselves. So metta, when we're doing those phrases, it's an instruction or an invitation to really imagine into the lives of others. And if we've stopped, and if we've come to our senses and noticed what is really going on and how life is affecting us, and then we open up to how that's happening to other people, then you've got a very powerful basis of, like Tolkien said, escaping the narrowness of one's own subjectivity. We don't want that really, do we? I don't want to just be me and this. I want to feel the connection with something beyond and the relationship with that which is beyond. So the metta bhavana is helping us to do that. We can do it in meditation, but you can do it all the time. So can we just notice what it's like for others? Do it now. Like, what do you think it's like for me to be sat here looking? I don't know how many people are in here, probably about 80 or something. 100, okay. And what do you think it's like? That will be different. Some of you will be like, God, it's terrifying. Others will be like, oh yeah, I'd quite like to do that. And I can think, well, what's it like for you to be sat there kind of anonymous in the crowd, but then I can pick you out instead of me. I like to do this thing when I'm walking around in the streets, particularly in winter when everyone's got their winter coats on and their hats and their scarves and their bags. I'm just imagining, like, what was it like on the day when that person bought that bag? And they're sort of imagining them looking in the mirror like, oh yeah. Or they opened the present, they took the wrapping paper off and they're like, ah, yeah, it's a nice present from somebody. You could say, well, that's just fantasy, because you don't know and you're just speculating. But the act of doing that, the act of imagining, has an effect on me. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. What matters is that I'm seeing this is another person just like me. And in connecting in that way, then something is changed in my experience of myself and my experience of life. So it's a powerful teaching, the Buddha's teaching on metta, but it's also a wonderful invitation to have an invitation to imagine more creatively. That is like gold, isn't it? How many times in your life have you been told to stop fantasizing and get real? Well, now I'm saying unleash the imagination. Really imagine, but not in the way that we might ordinarily do, which is to get lost in the forest. Or if you want to get lost in the forest, be creative with it and think of others. Do it with an open heart, with a mettaful heart. There's more to say, there's more I could say. I think the story's a bit too tidy at the end for me. That he gives the teaching, they go back, and then everything's fine, the fears stop, the disturbances stop. Maybe it was like that for the monks because they got the teaching directly from the Buddha. For me, it's more complicated than that. There's this constant coming and going, and but I don't have time to tell that story, so that will have to wait for another occasion. So we're just about there, and like I said, we entered a forest together this morning. We've been moving through it and we're about to leave it and move on. But like any great story, when we turn the last page, we're left with something. Maybe we're left with more than one thing, but many things to take forward and to carry out with us and to go on the next stage of the journey. So hopefully there have been a few of those things in this little exploration of this story. Particularly this thing around the heart's wish, our deeper motivation, the invitation to stop, to notice, come to our senses, and then to imagine, and to imagine intensely, and to imagine from the heart into relationship more and more fully with ourselves and with other people. So go into the forest of Kreuzberg and see what happens next. But thank you.